You are tuning in to AWANI Review with me, Hafiz Marzuki, filling in for Cynthia Ng. Now, governance is at the heart of effective leadership, whether both in public and private sector. While these two worlds operate under different structures, they are often faced with similar challenges, navigating accountability, driving efficiency, and also ensuring ethical leadership. Now, today we explore how governance strategies from both these sectors intersect and what lessons can be learned to strengthen leadership across these various industries. Now, joining me for this conversation here at Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia are two esteemed guests with extensive experience in governance. First, we have Datuk Seri Idris Jala. He is the Chairman and President of PEMANDU Associates, former Cabinet Minister and a leader in public sector transformation as well as private sector governance. We also have Puan Aida Lim Abdullah. She is a Senior Independent Non-Executive Director at Sunzen Group Bhd with over 30 years of experience in financial and capital markets. Thank you both for joining me for this conversation today. Datuk Seri, maybe we'll start with you. You've worked both in public and private sectors. From your experience, what do you think are the core principles of effective governance that transcend both these worlds?
I mean, the core principles has to start with both of them really focus on making sure that they have proper target setting, because management is all about delivering results.
True north.
True north. That is for both private as well as public, and that is key principle. The second one is to making sure that management is held accountable for delivering results. That's why you have quarterly meetings. You have to go through the entire process to make sure results is being delivered. And the third aspect is make sure that governance is done properly. Sometimes companies can do certain things, they can get outcomes, but not done in a manner that is proper. That means audit has to be done. And so the numbers are real, they're not fudged. And so the audit and governance is a key part of the role. So that's common for both public as well as private sector. That governance role is important. The third one is, I find many companies may do very well, but they may destroy the reputation and brand of the company in the process of doing it. So the board has to guard against any of that. So things like ethics that you referred to. And that's why the ethical issues are a very important part of what the board need to function. So all those four principles I described before is common among private and public boards. It's totally common. But the question is, if you dive deep inside there, you'll find the differences too. But they are common principles, but really when you get down, peel the onion a little bit deeper, you'll find differences in the way, but they're common.
I see.
But apart from all that, that's the role. You might also say, how do you make sure that you get the right people with the right mix of people on the board? That's the structure of the board, the composition of the board, that's another thing. And also the element of developing them and training them so that they're equipped with the tools required. That's where ICDM can play a very big part, and they do. The ICDM has a lot of training courses that's available to help boards step up their level of competencies so that they become really professional boards.
Okay, so Puan Aida, let's bring you in. With your experience, how does it shape your approach towards governance in the private?
Okay, now I have more than 30 years experience from observing and regulating public listed companies while I was holding position in Bursa Malaysia and Security Commission. Till now, I myself is inside public listed company. To me, I feel that the very important thing is the agility, the adaptability, accountability of professional directors that is able to bring in value add to the board. So while they are trying to strive for a result, profit, people also looking at what are the ethical values, and these are the intrinsic values of company can get, because those days, I have the privilege or honor to see the transformation, the change, and the transformation of the entire capital markets, from being a corporate banker to regulating the capital market public listed issue to educating them. So education and awareness and continuous learning in to make sure corporate governance is embraced properly and ingrained into the DNA of the company is very important. That's why I think in ICDM, they identify people with certain ability, certain competency fit for purpose, and to retrain them to fit into those industry. And by able to deliver profit, people applaud you in private sector. But if you can bring in integrity and professionalism to ensure the long-term sustainability of this organization, you get a standing ovation. And we see that all the time.
So when you talk about integrity, there are certain things that is very critical in public governance or public sector governance. Is there any, and private sector governance are seen as more dynamic compared to public, but what can the private sector learn from the public sector governance in their own practice, to strengthen their leadership?
Okay, I've been put to both GLC as well as public listed company and private company. Now, I find that in public company and GLC, one of the things is the system, the structure, and the accountability and transparency that is very much needed, is mandated and required. This is the part. They are more tilted towards social and community, okay, and public interest. So when they are mandated with that kind of requirement, they work towards that. Whereas private sector, they are more tilted to commercial goals, okay, in order to survive. So I feel that how private sector can learn something from the public sector is the ability to incorporate fields, the public interest, the social aspect into the private sector. That is something that many private sector in a hurry to do that, like what Datuk Seri just now mentioned, that they forget about the reputation and the public confidence about them. This is what public sector did quite well, is that they focus a lot on the public confidence. So this is another very valuable asset that all these private entities should also focus.
So Datuk Seri, what can the private learn from, what can the public learn from private sectors?
Let me just put it this way. I illustrate with the time I was in Malaysia Airlines. It was a publicly listed company. We had government representatives on the board, Khazanah on the board, and there were independent directors in the board. We got lots of problems. The first problem we had was they said, you guys are making a lot of losses flying to these destinations because you are inefficient. But when we begin to discuss it, the government control our price for rural air services. There was no way we could even break even at those prices, even with 100% load factor. It was impossible to make money because the price for our fare was lower than cost. So the government was telling us, how can you make those losses? So I then argued with them, look, the clear mandate that you told us in Malaysia Airlines was, this was a service that we were granting to rural communities, such as Barrio, such as Long Semado, rural places in Sarawak, and we could not charge more. But on the one hand, they keep on blaming us for incurring the losses. So I had a big discussions with the government. I said, look, let's discuss this at the board level, proper and steady. Put the facts on the table. We told them, at this price, this is the annual loss that we have. And if you want to increase it by 20%, we'll reduce the loss. So I made it transparent for them. So I then said to them, let's be clear in our minds, how much losses are you prepared to take? So if you say you want to take less loss, then you allow me to increase the price. So once we agree this, saya yang menurut perintah. You tell me at what price and what consequences it is. So in a way, we became quite balanced. So I had a long discussions with the government to be very clear to them the balance between how much price do we charge for the ticket on those rural air services and how much losses or consequences as a result of doing it. Only when we were having that serious discussion of the facts, then everybody understood. Then we didn't get best from the government, we didn't get best from the public too, because everybody understood this. There was a time, to be clear, if you look at the history, the government decided to take away all the rural routes from Malaysia Airlines in my time and gave it to Tony Fernandez. So Tony ran all those routes because they said Malaysia Airlines was inefficient. They gave it to Tony. So Tony set up a company called Fax. And then they ran all the routes and lost even more than us. And then after 1.5 years, Tony gave up on those routes and returned this to us. So when the government said, Tony has given up on those rural air services, will you please take back the routes? I said, now I take it back on my own terms.
Yeah.
So then we discussed precisely how we're going to do it. So it was that lesson learned that everybody knew that we had to perform our role properly as a board, looking at how much public interest do we cover and how much profitability is being taken into account. That balance is what is normally in the role ambit of publicly listed company, which GLC. The GLC is a lot of that. Whereas in the private sector, you don't have to worry about community interests. You really focus on profitability. So I think that is a very important act to take place. But the only way you can get to the conundrum that we face there, to put the facts on the table, have a robust and frank discussion.
When we talk about transparency, Datuk Seri, how does it affect leadership styles or decision making at board level for private sector and public sector? Because you said you have to prioritize public interest over profitability. But how do you manage? I
think when you begin, in my view, leadership is a very important part of governance and board. If you have the right leadership, you will make a lot of decisions that is correct. I believe when you start a new journey, big journey to transform and change, the style of leadership has to be quite directive. Don't have too much democratic discussion in the beginning, because if you do that, you will never even move.
Too many noises.
Too much noises. But you have to be very directive. In this particular case, I was very directive. I went directly to the Prime Minister, and I went directly to the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Finance, laid on the table the facts on the table and the consequences. And I told them very frankly, if you wanted us to improve the profitability, these are the steps we need to take. If you wanted us to deal with the public interest, these are the considerations, these are compromises. So we have to put that. That's a very directive approach. I personally went out to go and do that conversation and direction, together with our chairman at the time was Tan Sri Munir. And so we had to go and do that. But as we began to implement it, and people know what they do in the organizations, they are very competent, they can run with it. We ran the labs, we turned around the airline, we made record profit. The leadership style must change from being directive, much more towards empowering. So you cannot have one style of leadership continuously. It must be adaptive.
According to situation.
Yeah, according to situation. And this is a lot of material has been written on adaptive leadership or situational leadership by Ken Blanchard. And if you Google it, you'll find lots of material on it. In Harvard, they talk a lot about it as well, about adaptive leadership. The need to adapt your leadership style based on the circumstances that you're in. So a lot of board members are highly multidimensional. I think professional boards in leadership style must be ambidextrous. Know when to be left hand, when to be right hand. And that means based on the situation, you adapt your style accordingly.
Basically, point Aida, when we said, based on what Datuk Seri said, you cannot use a one-size-fits-all approach. So, and leveraging on your experience at regulatory level, boards today are facing increasing regulatory pressures. What are the challenges that are facing, public boards, and compare those challenges to the private boards?
Well, I would say both sides share the same challenges. The expectation actually that causes all the need to comply. And regulator also wanted to have this, what you call that, managing all these expectations. Now, like what just now Datuk Sri mentioned about the ability to be versatile, to adapt. This is one part that is so important. Now, I witnessed the transformation era from the 90s. After the post-financial crisis in 1999, I was being put into Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange at that time. We have about 1,300 companies. So what we can do, what we have to do at that time is to reset So that's when director education have to come in. So I think in that era, in 2000, actually in 2000, government came out with a green book, if Datuk Seri can remember.
Yes, I remember the green book. You had the red book as well, the silver book.
Yeah, so,
so many
it says
colours.
our era, that green book was the beginning of Malaysia chapter in corporate governance.
That's right.
And that system, at that time in that green book was, although it's very simple, not as complicated as today. That's why your issue on whether people feel overburdened, the board feel overburdened. If you look at section 213, if I'm not wrong, section 213 of the Company Acts say that. So whether we like it or not, if the GLC is also registered under, governed by Company Act, that particular section require directors full commitment and responsibility to make sure nothing goes wrong. Now, we don't have a crystal ball in our hand, right? So, situation keep changing. Some are inevitable, uncontrollable, external factors, especially when we are moving into globalization. Now, in that kind of situation, a lot of board will scale down, cut down in the compliance because there is cost element and all that. And they think all this training and all that will take a toll. And in fact, to me, that's what I always like to, I quote from somebody actually, this quote was that, if you think compliance or education is costly, you try non-compliance and no education, you see. So the education, like what ICDM also reinforce and emphasize whenever they have all these new director, first-time director come on board, ICDM prepare them, give them the right perspective, the right, what do you call that, awareness and education, like the MAP program, which was introduced, mandatory accreditation program in ICDM. I think this type of thing help to make all directors understand that compliance, governance are needed to ensure the company sail through properly.
I want to touch on diversity before we end this conversation. But I would like to ask Datuk Seri, especially diversity is usually linked to innovation in boards and better efficiency. How do you see this approach being practiced both in public and private sectors?
Very important. Diversity is a key element in proper and effective board. I always think that the best team that you have, whether it's in sports, whether in corporation, it's a mix of the talent that you have. People with diverse ways of thinking, diverse ways of doing things, and diverse ways of relating to and communicating with others. These are the three levels of diversity. And if you have the same way of thinking, you're not going to be the best outcome. If you have the same way of doing things, also you wouldn't get the best outcome. But you tend to find the diversity is not just from gender perspective, but from where they come from. Their background and the things that they do, the way the guy analyzes it, the way he thinks about it, very, very different. So if you get the right people, the right mix of people, the diverse thinking, the best ways of doing things, the way interrelating, you get the best talent. And I've been very fortunate. I worked in Shell for 23 years. It's a very diverse company. It's Anglo-Dutch, but we operate in 100 countries. So wherever I worked before, and I was in Holland for 4 years, completely different way in which they do it there. Then I was in London for 4 years. We had all sorts of nationalities, and I was Malaysian. I was in charge of the team called Retail Management, covering 100 countries around the world on retail petrol station business. I mean, we have 50,000 retail stations across the world, in Brazil, in Malaysia, and other places like that. You will see very different ways of thinking, different ways of doing it. Although Shell has different, same method and methodologies for doing it, but the way in which they did this in this operating company is very diverse. So I had the opportunity to work in Sri Lanka, 3 years there, Shell Sri Lanka. Very diverse ways of doing it. So I think diversity in the period I've been around, I realized that's such an important subject. And I learned so much because I've been posted to many different working environments. Also jobs where you work in. If you do the same job for a very long period of time, it sets you down a pathway that you don't actually have the opportunity to look left and right. But I was very fortunate. I worked in HR, I worked in corporate planning, and I was in retail, I was in sales, in marketing, and business turnaround, and different parts of business, work in the airlines, work in oil and gas, and consultancy. So if you've done that, and I'm now co-chairman of Sunway. We have 13 different business units there. So when we talk about 13 businesses, sometimes we talk about hotel, talk about hospital, construction. It's very diverse. It's wonderful to opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm a very key advocate of diversity.
Okay, Aida, what are your thoughts on diversity in leadership?
I perfectly agree with Datuk Seri. Now, diversity, why is it important? Not only diverse in terms of background, culture, whatever, it helps the company to prevent unforeseeable situation. Now, just something to share here while Datuk Seri was sharing, it brings back the memory when I first came back from London in 1990s to work for the biggest conglomerate in Malaysia, which is today called UEM World. Now, there's one thing that our trainer trained us at very young age, because at 7 years we are supposed to be groomed to become C-level, is they want a team of rugby.
Okay.
Not
rugby.
Rugby. So they want rugby team. Why? Because you see tall, short, and all the different.
Okay.
Some are meant for the goal. Some are for running. You know, all the side runner. They are the speed. So to combine this, you make a very successful team. So that's why I remember during the launching, I think that time was one of our director told us this. We don't want a Maradona. That means we don't want only one person is good. We want MU, Manchester United. So that means
not doing well.
So it doesn't matter who is in or out. Your succession planning is always there. The brand is the entity to continue. So we feel proud of affiliate, or like Datuk Seri is very proud of Shell. Like for me, I'm very proud of the organization I've been through, CIMB, Brusa, SC, QSR, Penang Halal International, where I was the CEO. So all this, what makes the success ingredient is the openness of the leadership on top, to able to, what do you call that, embrace that differences. So many times we say, agreeing in a, even if you disagree.
Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. Yeah, and then the thing is that diversification is definitely good, but we also have to maintain. We don't diverse to the extreme where harmonious is broken. So still, we need that harmonious. This is what Malaysian culture are quite good. That's what I noted. Now, I used to work elsewhere, so in other countries. I noticed Malaysia culture, we have tendency to be more polite. In Malay, we say melapik. That means even when we say something, we try to tone it down, sweeten it. So a lot of times, this kind of message didn't get through in the board. So that's why diversity is important, because you have differences.
You can pick up on
yes.
Sure. Right. I would like to thank you both for this enlightening conversation. Thanks, Aida. Thank you, Datuk Seri. That's all the time we have for this edition of AWANI Review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.